On Sunday, May 4th, 1913, every bell in the city of Georgetown rang as the body of Daniel J. Crowley was laid to rest in the churchyard of Prince George Episcopal Church. How did this man, who came to Georgetown at the age of 13, become so well loved that thousands of citizens from all over the state showed up to pay their respects? Our Hidden History object this month takes a look at this man, his many accomplishments in the city, and how they were cut short by his untimely death at the age of 54. Our archival object is a small glass bottle with the words DJ Crowley and Georgetown SC embossed on the front. It's small in size, but when it was produced, it was one of thousands that left the bottling plant full of refreshing beverages. Born on September 25th, 1859 in Charleston, South Carolina, Daniel Crowley was orphaned by the age of 2. Little is known of those early years, but his name appears in the 1870 census for the Charleston Orphan House. By age 13, he moved to Georgetown and began to work at a local store as an errand boy. Soon, he began to work for Mr. and Mrs. John McFeely in their store at 718 Front Street. Mr. McFeely served as the postmaster for Georgetown after the Civil War and opened his own mercantile business. He died in 1869, and his wife Catherine continued to run the business. By the time of her death in 1884, the local paper said, "By strict economy, judicious investments, and unremitting attention to business, she was able to live her years quite comfortably." The executor to her estate was William D. Morgan, who also conducted her funeral. Mrs. McFeely's sister, Sarah A. Sullivan, noticed the young man and appreciated his dedication to hard work. She agreed to help him to finance his dream of owning his own business. He purchased a grist mill and a small grocery, and by the mid-1880s, it's clear that this young man was making great strides to better himself. There are several mentions of business partners in the Georgetown papers, including the Georgetown planing mill, which he operated with a Mr. Anderson. The location of this mill was at the corner of King and Front Streets, which would, in a few years, become home to his booming grocery and ice business. By 1892, Daniel Crowley's grocery business at 936 Front Street was up and running, and before long, ads began to appear in local papers. In 1893, an ad for Crowley's ice, "Keep cool," it said. Ice was delivered in wagons and cost just $100 for 150 pounds. Soon, a new well was dug to allow for more water to be pumped in. In 1896, Crowley's was the only business in town able to sell alcohol, and Crowley made good use of this by serving beer, oysters, and crackers after a local election. Things did get dicey, though, when he was raided by the state constable in 1894. Nothing suspicious was found, and business carried on. The Georgetown Semi-Weekly Times toured his ice plant in 1996, and the writer was most impressed by the freezing of rice birds. Rice birds, or bobolinks, are best remembered as one of the leading causes for the collapse of rice in the South Carolina Lowcountry, and many plantation owners began to sell them to their wealthy northern neighbors who considered them a delicacy. Crowley's bought the birds, paying the local children 2 cents per dozen, and one would imagine that plenty of birds were produced. The birds were placed in paper bags, frozen, and then sold off to whoever wanted to pay the price. The Sanborn fire maps show how his business was growing during this time. Crowley was able to keep up with the demand as Georgetown itself was booming with expanding industry and new business. The 1899 map shows the impressive ice factory, along with his freezer, stables, meat storage, and more. The 1908 map shows how he's continued to expand his enterprise, adding on more storage, dwelling houses for himself and his employees, and how he now takes an entire block. The Georgetown Daily Item in 1908 had this to say: Crowley is a liberal-hearted, public-spirited citizen and has contributed largely towards the development of Georgetown. Groceries, meat, bottling works, ice plant, which has capacity of 25 tons a day, and he employs 30 men and boys. Crowley's motto, "Honesty is the best policy," served him well in his business life. He continued to successfully operate his business over the next several years, and his business offered a variety of fresh items to customers. In April 1902, he advertised that the price of meat was increasing at the parlor market, but everyone hoped it would only be a temporary increase. Crowley's was also one of 2 places in Georgetown that offered a wireless telegraph machine. The other was located in City Hall, which was just down the street. The ad even encouraged people to get a party together to send messages back and forth. In December 1910, the Daily Item applauded Crowley for his festive window display, which must have been a sight to see. Sadly, no photos exist. Unfortunately for Daniel Crowley, business came to an end in May 1913 when he started to feel unwell. At midnight on May 3rd, Doctors Moore, Bell, Gilliard, Beckman, and Sparkman performed an emergency appendectomy on Crowley at his home on Front Street. The Georgetown Times reported that at 2:30 a.m. he was not well and that the physicians held out no hope. On page 3 came the announcement that he had passed away. Father Wood from the Catholic Church performed the service, and Crowley was laid to rest in the McFeely family plot at Prince George Episcopal Churchyard. Citizens lined the street, singing the tune, "Nearer, My God, to Thee." His pallbearers were a list of who's who in Georgetown, and his casket was decorated with flowers from both the city of Georgetown and the South Carolina governor, Cole Blease. When his will was read, his wealth was divided among several heirs, including the Catholic orphanage in Charleston, the local Catholic church in Georgetown, and his longtime supporter, Sarah Sullivan. Miss Sullivan was living close by the Crowley property at the time of Daniel's death, and she stepped in to run the business, keeping his name and his legacy intact. She ran the business until her death in 1922. An ad later appears in the newspaper selling 4 properties owned by Sullivan, including the one on the corner of Front and King. The beautiful building and surrounding property was sold to Carolina Grocery Company for the sum of $30,300. Business continued to operate in the building for many years, but eventually time got the better of the building, and in 1967 the building was condemned and torn down. Today, little remains in Georgetown of the Crowley legacy, name, or even the building. But this glass bottle survives to remind us of Daniel J. Crowley and his love for his adopted city.